former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Ivo Dowler. He has been critical of the administration's approach on ending the war, writing, quote, "A serious effort focused on supporting Ukraine and pressuring Russia might have produced results. But this plan isn't serious. It's insulting." Ivo Dowler joins us now from Chicago. Really grateful to get your insights here. You know, embodied in your statement there is a concern that this leaves Ukraine not much wiggle room here. And it leaves not just Ukraine vulnerable, right, but Europe as well, vulnerable to Russian aggression in future, even after a ceasefire. Why do you believe Ukraine and European allies have been unable, really, to convince anyone in the Trump administration to this point of that vulnerability, of that risk of making this kind of a deal?
Well, I think they have been able to convince Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and indeed the conversations that took place in Geneva on Sunday with Marco Rubio, senior European leaders, as well as the Ukrainians, shifted the conversation away from this Russian pursued 28-point plan to what is now a 19-point plan that the Ukrainians are claiming, and I believe the Europeans also claim is much closer to what could be acceptable, with some very important issues with regard to territory and other issues to be resolved. But I think it's important that, as Betsy's report just underscored, what Steve Witkoff, who is the principal negotiator, is trying to do is to try to side with Russia against Ukraine. Not only did he ask the president of Russia to call the president of the United States and flatter him and to allow him to make this kind of have this conversation, he also implied that if he called before President Zelensky came to Washington on October 17th, then perhaps President Putin could prevent the sale of Tomahawk missiles, which was going to be under discussion with President Zelensky, to Ukraine. And indeed, after the meeting, President Trump said he was not going to sell these missiles. So not only is he trying to serve the Russian side on the negotiations, he's trying to serve the Russian side in the actual fighting of the war.
Right, in terms of actually taking away any leverage that the United States might have had to try and get Russia to an agreement. I do want to lean into some of these details of the 19 points apparently that may be left. There are concessions that apparently Ukraine is willing to make. But what conditions, as far as you see them, are non-negotiable? I am thinking of things like security guarantees. I mean, at one point, there weren't supposed to be any boots on the ground from allies. Is that something that should be a concession that Ukraine is making at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think there are two fundamental issues. One is the issue of territory, and President Zelensky has said he is the only one who can negotiate that, so that is tabled. The other is Ukraine's sovereignty. What does it mean to be a sovereign state? It means that you can decide for yourself how to provide for your own security. There's the strength and capability of your army, the capabilities that army possesses, and the friendships that it has with other countries. If Ukraine, as a sovereign country, decides that it needs and wants other countries to deploy their troops on Ukrainian territory, then that should be its sovereign right. That is not something you negotiate away. The idea that somehow you're going to limit Ukrainian sovereignty, which is at the core of this 28-point plan, is a Russian idea. It's not a Ukrainian idea. It's not a European idea, and it shouldn't be a U.S. idea. The sovereignty of Ukraine means it can decide the size of its armed forces and the capabilities. It can decide who it will ally with. It can decide whether or not foreign troops are on its territory, not Russia, which went to war to prevent Ukraine from deciding that. That is the core issue in this war, and somehow the administration doesn't seem to get that.
Yeah, and it is the core issue that has been brought up again and again, not just by Ukraine, but the European allies, that so-called coalition of the willing. You know, it strikes me that this is all sound and fury signifying absolutely nothing, because I cannot see which concessions Russia is willing to make at this hour. This all serves a purpose, though, for Russia still, right? Even if it doesn't get to the table, sign up to any kind of a ceasefire, even, never mind a peace agreement.
Yeah, no, it serves a great purpose. It divides the United States from Europe. It divides the United States from Ukraine. It serves to have a whole discussion we have this week that says, what is Ukraine going to accept? As opposed to, when is Russia going to stop this war? After all, Russia started this war. It's Russian aggression that started it, not the Ukrainians. Ukrainians were living their lives in peace, not threatening Russia, not in any way trying to take territory from Russia. And yet we spend an entire week debating what Ukraine will and will not accept, as opposed to talking about what Russia needs to do in order to end this war. And that is a major success for Vladimir Putin. Every moment we talk about what Ukraine needs to do is a moment that Russia wins.
Ivo, I don't have a lot of time left, but given, what you've seen in the last couple of weeks, I mean, many people want a deal to happen, right? And not least of which are the Ukrainian people themselves. There is certainly momentum after the Middle East ceasefire. Having said that, look, you're negotiating with a terror group, not a nuclear superpower there. What odds do you see of this coming together? Because to give the Trump administration credit, at times they seem able to break deadlocks that other administrations cannot.
Well, I mean, we're approaching Thanksgiving, so yes, this is a time when one hopes that peace can prevail. But I'm afraid that the differences between Russia and Ukraine are just too big to bridge diplomatically, no matter how skilled or not the diplomacy is from the Trump administration. So I'm afraid we're going to see this continuing for quite a while, unless and until Putin decides to end this war. He can decide tomorrow, take his troops out, go home, and the war will be over. It's that simple, and that should be our goal.
And that has been repeated often over the last few years. Ivo Daalder, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll continue to speak to you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Paula.